The last 3 years have seen 1,100 cases of people being saved by animals, which according to official statistics is just the tip of the iceberg. I know for a fact that there are loads more amazing rescues that just aren't widely known. Animals saving humans goes way back to the beginning of time. It is important to give dogs some credit though. They save lives every day, even at the cost of their own. Today, I am going to tell you about what has been one of the more unbelievable cases I have had to face. Heidi is a shepherd. The bravery and loyalty of this dog have made it famous around the world. But first things first, Heidi's life wasn't easy. At first, she was a loyal friend of a 55-year-old man named Scott. Their friendship was so strong that it seemed that nothing could come between them. The man brought the dog home when it was just a little puppy. But as we all know, life can throw you a curveball at the most unexpected time. Sadly, a serious disease took Scott's life. The man's relatives refused to take in the dog and just sent her to a shelter like something unwanted. I think it goes without saying that it was difficult for Heidi to come to terms with the sudden changes in her life. She used to have a beloved human who spent so much time with her and who she's been loyal to for so long. Days went by, but all Heidi had was a small crate and scheduled feedings. It might seem strange, but Heidi couldn't get used to living in a shelter for quite a long time. She missed her owner and would spend her days just staring at one spot. She even refused to eat for the first 5 days there. She was crying, and it was difficult for me to look into her sad eyes, said Michael, who was working at the shelter at the time. Weeks went by, and even though time is supposed to heal all wounds, and Heidi did learn to live with her pain, one could still see the sadness in her eyes. Given the dog's age, nobody wanted to adopt her, and the only thing left Heidi was to watch puppies from the neighboring crates getting adopted all the time, and give up all hope of ever getting adopted herself. And things would have probably remained like that forever, if it wasn't for an unexpected turn of events, which gave start to a whole new story. A story which could even be made into a movie. One day a man named Jim came to the shelter. He was elderly and wanted to adopt a dog, or rather a puppy, to brighten up his loneliness a little. He gave up on his plans. As soon as he saw Heidi, we all know how it goes when two soulmates meet. To the great surprise of the shelter staff, the dog that's been depressed for so long completely switched at the sight of Jim. She didn't just jump up, but even started wagging her tail and gave the guest a hopeful look, as of saying, "Here I am." It was probably fate that brought me to Heidi. After all, I looked at her and realized that it was my dog. I decided instantly, and I went home with this shepherd dog, Jim said. Back then, he couldn't even imagine that this encounter would turn his whole world upside down. From that day on, the friendship between the man and the dog began to develop. And while Jim was a little weary, he did take in an adult dog after all. Heidi was very open in showing her affection. Despite his age, Jim was 63 years old at the time. The man led an active lifestyle. Heidi was doing a great job of keeping up, and followed her new owner everywhere. They often played wandering the parks and even watched TV together. Heidi especially enjoyed watching the Discovery Channel, snuggled up with her owner. All in all, they led a normal life, until one day when everything changed. One weekend, Heidi and I were fishing. Even though she doesn't really like water, she's still always happy to accompany me. Jim took the tackle, and they got into the boat and sailed away from the coast, hoping to catch the biggest fish. If Jim had known at this time that it might be his last fishing trip, he would have definitely checked the boat and wouldn't have sailed so far away from the shore. Everything was fine at first. I was only worried to see that Heidi was a little anxious. She usually sits quietly and just watches me fish. But that day she was rushing about the boat, and even barking. I even raised my voice at her, asking her to quiet down, before she scared away all the fish. Too bad that I didn't pay attention to her anxiety. The men were called later. Jim cast the fishing line, and after a couple of minutes, there was a strike. It was obvious that the fish was rather big. He reached for the net, which was in the front of the boat, and when he picked it up, he got terrified, as he saw water leaking into the boat. It was very scary. Jim dropped the fishing rod and tried to deal with the situation, but it was too late. Water was filling the boat too fast, and it was obvious that it wasn't going to end well, and it didn't. Some 10 minutes later, the boat was full of water, and then it just turned over. As the man later said, "I was very scared, and I was especially worried about Heidi, because I knew very well that she didn't like water, but to my surprise, the dog kept float well. We spent the first 2 hours holding on to the boat. I understood that we couldn't get to the shore on our own, and we barely had enough strength just to stay afloat. Heidi was also getting very tired. We just looked into each other's eyes and we knew that it was most likely the end." Sometime later the day was already coming to an end. It was beginning to get dark, and I was losing my last strength. We couldn't see the shore, and the current only carried the boat further out into the ocean. I had no hope of getting rescued, but at that moment, I was more worried about my Heidi because it was my carelessness that got us into this mess. I think the most probable ending to the story is quite obvious. A headline in the local newspaper, at best. A man and a dog missing, however. Something truly unexpected happened. I realized that I didn't have enough strength to swim. So, I decided that I would at least save Heidi. She didn't want to leave me. She was ready to stay with her owner till the very end. And while it was clear that I was doomed, she had at least a tiny chance of surviving. So, I told her to go get help. I just hoped that she would reach the shore and save herself. To Jim's surprise, the dog understood what he wanted her to do and swam towards the shore. The man just watched the animal that could barely keep afloat disappear in the distance, and 15 minutes later, he could no longer make out Heidi's silhouette. Jim held on to the overturned boat as it began to drift away from the shore into the open ocean. But as it turned up, this was far from the end of this story. You won't believe it, but Heidi swam for 11 hours to get people. I was sailing in Moreton Bay when I saw a dog in the water. Of course, I was surprised because I didn't see any boats nearby. So I wondered what the dog was doing there alone. I dragged her into my boat and noticed that she was exhausted. She was breathing heavily, and I understood that she had been in the water for a long time, but with her strength. The dog was trying to communicate that something happened in the ocean, said Newton, the fisherman who spotted Heidi in the ocean. The man raised the alarm, informing the authorities that he had found a dog far from the coast. And soon they began the search and rescue operation. It involved a helicopter, 4 police ships, a jet ski, the Coast Guard, and volunteer rescuers. A huge number of people began to scour the water surface, and in the end, they found Heidi's owner, who was clinging to an overturned 4-meter-long boat, and who only had enough strength left to last another couple of hours at best. As it turned out later, Jim spent about 15 hours in the water and Heidi was looking for help for 11 hours fighting the ocean waves. The man was taken to the hospital, and the heroic animal was taken to the vet for examination. Fortunately, both the dog and her owner were all right. The doctors simply told them to rest for a few days. This story covered by the Australian media, and as it got widely known, Heidi became a hero. Even despite her fear of water, she still managed to help her owner and swam the ocean for an unbelievable 11 hours, using her last bit of strength to save her human life. For her courage and heroism, the Queensland Police made Heidi honorary police. Today, the two friends live in perfect harmony, resting on the shore and looking at the ocean, that very ocean that nearly killed them both.